Welcome to Stay Humble podcast, Julia.lee. How are you feeling today?
All right, actually. Yeah. We had a bit of snow last week. I live in Huddersfield. We had a bit of snow last week, so that's gone now. So it's just wet. So it's a lot better. We had about 3 inches on Friday.
Oh,
So
done
really
good.
high up. So I'm quite pleased that it's gone now, so that I can get out and do my dog walking on the hills without slipping and sliding everywhere.
I can imagine that being quite challenging. We didn't get anything wound here, unfortunately. So basically, Julia, what I want to talk about is, firstly, I would like to talk, obviously, about your founding of Commonsense Initiative. But what I really wanted to just get into first is that you became the first woman referee in rugby league in this country and in Australia. Like, how did you get into sort of that? Because it's really quite an interesting story. And obviously, I've done a little bit of background as well and found out that it's actually become a play as well. So it's quite interesting. And I think people that were listening would be interested to find out how you got involved in rugby league in terms of that.
Yeah. Well, I was a Hull KR fan from, sorry about that, Dave. From being 12. Wembley 1980 was one of my first games, so that's probably turned off a lot of your people now.
No, they listen from all over.
As a young girl, when I was brung up, my uncle, I actually was born in West Hull, but my uncle was a big Hull KR fan, so he wanted us to go off to Hull KR. And then one of the first games I went to when I was 12 was Hull KR v Hull FC at Wembley. And then I was hooked. So I just loved it. I found a place where I fitted, where I loved to interact with people, where I could vent my frustrations and anger as a teenager, and got some really good mates I had lots in common with. And then it was I think it was a very wet, cold day, because I used to be a referee abuser, like many on the terraces, where I was just fed up of referees and I was complaining like mad, very politely, obviously. And then someone says, well, there's an advert here in the programme. Why don't you give it a go if you're so good at it? So the answer was, I'm as good as any of these clowns, so why not? So I applied, not thinking anything else about it, and then got a letter back probably 2 or 3 weeks later saying, dear Mr. Lee, you're very welcome. So from there on, it just took off, really, because... initially I had to ring up and they said, well, you're not Mr. Lee. And it was, no, I'm Julia.lee. And it was, well, we haven't got any women referees. We're not quite sure what's going to happen next. So they then had to have quite a few meetings. At that time, and I think they still do meet at Ideal Standard. I'm not quite sure. They met at Ideal Standard, very smoke-ridden, the days of smoking inside. So I... eventually got invited to go, and then they had about 50-60 members of referees, so it was a big society. And I always say I think everybody came out to that meeting because there'd been such a fuss about me joining, whether they could let me or join, that everyone wanted to come and have a look at me. And I'm sure they told me the wrong time, so everybody was sitting in place ready for me to come in. And it was like stars in your eyes. So as I sort of came through the smoke-filled room, today, Julia, you're going to be a rugby league referee. So that's how it all started. Some good friends there now. Good friends there. And I did my first under-11s, and they were like giants, because in those days, really, they didn't train you as a referee. They just gave you the laws of the game book, which anyone that knows the laws of the game book's about this thick and doesn't tell you how to referee. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire. And all of a sudden, I was in the Hull Daily Mail and I was on the radio, and my mum says, well, you can't be giving this up, can you? Because it's not on, really. So then I started doing more and more games, eventually enjoying it. But I must say the first few years were just horrific. I hated every minute of it.
Were there influences from family and stuff to carry it on then, or was it just sort of yourself, like in terms of you sort of pushed yourself towards doing refereeing? Was it your motivation to push on and become that sort of, the first professional referee?
Yeah, it was really. I'm very, very competitive with myself and with other people. And the first 5 years, it wasn't good to be a referee in my first 5 years. I mean, I moved to London pretty quickly after I'd started refereeing and went straight on to open age refereeing. And there were Sunday punch-ups, if we're honest. So it was the Fulham Travellers, the Colonials, the London Colonials, which were a mixture of Australians and Kiwis. There was loads of expats. And, they were rolling out the pub and they were playing Sunday rugby. and all over London and beyond, because then it was called Mazwala, so you could travel up to 3 or 4 hours to your nearest open age game, and you didn't get them every week, so you couldn't get into a pattern of how you referee. And although there was a laws of the game exam, that was it. You were on your own, really. And then I went to Australia in 1988. I'd seen the Kangaroos tour in the 80s, 84, I think it was, Boothry Park. I don't know if it was 83 or 84. I'd always said after that tour, I'm going to Australia for the next tour. So I was living in London and I just saved up and thought, right, I'm going out for the tour. And I ended up staying for a year. And that's when I started refereeing in Australia. Because I thought, while I'm here, I might as well have a go at refereeing. Really welcome, doing loads of kids' games. But they also and they still have, and we have more now, had a really good structure for training up referees. So I got instructed on the laws, how to interpret them, where to stand, how to blow your whistle, all these things that I'd just been haphazardly doing when I was refereeing in London, waving my arms around and blowing my whistle intermittently. So when I came back from Australia, I then thought, well, I've got the tools now. I'm going to give this a real go. Because I'd also done a bit of playing while I was in London. So, because one of the things a lot of people had said to me is you can't referee unless you've played. Well, there was no team in London then. The Women's League only set up in 1985. And obviously London, there wasn't a lot of rugby league going on, just mostly open age. So I set up Fulham Women. I advertised in Time Out magazine and got a load of women that had never seen a game of rugby league, and we travelled up north every week. Got absolutely stuffed and went back. And a few of them came, and we linked up with Fulham Men's. Bev Risman was the coach at the time, and he was brilliant at Chiswick, as it was then. Did some curtain raisers and enjoyed my playing days. And I've got some good friends still from my sort of London days. And then when I moved up north after I came back from Australia, still did a bit of playing with Hull Vixens this time. They'd been formed, I think 1991 they were formed. And still playing for them, and then started doing my fitness tests, there's further exams, and started going onto the professional ranks from national conference into Colts and A-team as it was then. And just loving it, really enjoying it. Because I felt, when I say really enjoying it, some of them were tough, but getting better at it because I was more practiced and had been taught, and felt as though I was getting more skilled, and there was a lot more support when I came back, and mentoring and things like that. So yeah, it was a bit of a baptism of fire, I must say.
Can I ask you about just with that, in terms of refereeing men's rugby, like what was the sort of respect towards you as a referee? Was there any sort of where you felt a bit uncomfortable at times or anything like that by certain players, or do you feel like players were respectful of your decisions, being the referee?
Yeah, before a game was always not very pleasant, because there were always, if you changed in between the changing rooms, particularly because I went to a lot of games on my own. I didn't have touch judges when I was doing national conference and amateur games. They were always saying, oh, we're not going to have this ref. She's a woman. She must be useless. There's all those sort of things that were before I'd even got out. So there was always that anticipation. But to be honest, rugby league's a great sport to referee, because there is respect for the referee. It might have taken me a bit longer than a man, because they would try things out thinking I didn't know the laws of the game or didn't know where to stand, or, have a word in my ear and talking back. But after about 10, 15 minutes, and usually when they started calling you sir, you knew that you were just a referee. So you were just going out there and you were going to be probably abused the same as any other referee. Because the respect in rugby league is, compared to football, particularly at that time, is totally different. And you've got the 10 metre rule with the back chat. If the back chat 10 metres, and then they get sent off if they continue with it. So that's always, a strength of the sport. And I always felt backed up, because again, in rugby league, a referee's report is a legal document. So if I had to send anyone off or do anything, you were always 100% backed. I only had 2 brawls in my whole career. And I was fully backed with both of those. One of them started before I'd even got on the pitch. They were all fighting and there was just blood all over. So there was nothing to do with that. And yeah, there was some players really struggled with it. But, they had a choice. They either stayed on or didn't. And again, I was backed. There was one player who came on the pitch. It was in East Hull. He took someone's head off, basically, a coat hanger, tackle, took the head off his shoulders, immediately not going to be sent off by a woman. So I just said, well, the game stops, and all the players rally round. And, he was being removed from the pitch by his peers, really. But at that point, he dropped his shorts and went tootling off. So he got 8 matches for showing everyone what he had under his shorts. So, yeah, it's not easy because spectators are relentless in whatever sport, particularly rugby league. And the laws of the game are really tough to understand, to be honest, and to get right and to interpret right. And also, you only have a snap. You can't be perfect all the time, so you're not always going to get all the decisions right. But as a referee, that's what you try and do because it's, you're proud of it. So, yeah, I think on the whole, players, well, they were great. Not many brawls, quite a few sendings off on Sunday rugby when I moved back to Hull. But that was Sunday rugby. I wasn't the only referee that had a lot of that. Again, it was a good baptism of fire learning how to referee Sunday rugby.
And then how did it come about in terms of you, basically your life being portrayed in as it's called Ref, wasn't it? The play.
Yeah, we're hoping to do it next year. Well, it was there's a tour of memorabilia which went on, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago. There was all different pictures it was put together to go to different venues, and it was at Hull Heritage Centre. And unbeknownst to me, the woman that was organising it, she had blown up a 6-foot picture of me and put it in the museum, and I didn't know, so I turned up and suddenly there was this huge picture of me. And I thought, oh, goodness me. Anyway, the player, Sarah Jane Dickinson, who's a lecturer at Hull University, well, more than a lecturer, she runs departments in the arts department and English department, approached me and went, I'd like to write a story about you. I'd like to write a play. And I went, yeah, all right, if you want. She says, can we meet again? So I went, yeah, okay, if you want. And initially it was going to be on Radio 4, which I love my Radio 4 plays. I thought, oh, God, having a Radio 4 play about yourself, that'd be lovely. Anyways, we met probably for about 6 months where she just went through everything and then wrote it up into this play. And it's very comical. It's a 4-hander, so it's 4 people. And it's very poignant. So although it's funny, it's got some really key messages in around sort of what happened in my life and struggles, but also some of the reality of being one of the first in something that you do. So we've toured it twice. So it's been to Hull twice. It's been Featherstone, Batley and Castleford. And our intention, and we don't know where this is going yet, was to tour it next year linked to the Rugby League World Cup. But obviously funding's, we don't know where we are with funding. But again, to link that as well to making a difference to people so people can actually see what went on in my life and in my journey and actually see that anything's possible, with a bit of tenacity and resilience, and also have things really change now in sport. So, yeah, so there's some really key messages, but it's a real honour to have something. It's also been developed into a book, so you can buy it on Amazon. Because it's a book play by Sarah Jane Dickinson, and we filmed it as well, filmed it on the set. So we haven't decided what we're going to do with that yet, but it's been filmed. So I'm a play film. If you're doing charades, I'm a book play and a film.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome to find out. Like I say, like having a biography of your life being portrayed, obviously through a book and through a play. And like I say, with it being a World Cup year next year, that'd be excellent if it is given that opportunity to be broadcasted across the country, hopefully for people to see and stuff like that. Be a great move for that. And like you was just saying before to me as well, you were talking about still growing the game in terms of rugby league, in terms of the women's, and sounds like some exciting things in terms of that you're looking to sort of broaden rugby league in terms of women's rugby as well, like with the people that you sort of talk to and stuff. I was just wondering, in terms.
Yeah. Well, I'm very passionate about growing rugby league because I was 20 years the development officer of rugby league, so it's a passion of mine because I do. And funny enough, I was just talking to someone today who's not from a rugby league background and was just saying rugby league people have such passion and they are real communities. Well, you can see from Kevin Sinfield and him doing his 7 marathons and how everybody rallying around each other. And that's rugby league through and through. And that's something I'm really passionate about and really love about the sport, that it gets to the root of its communities. So we do, all the clubs do so much in the communities to make a difference to people. And I wanted my story to make that difference to people. So hence why I took it around rugby clubs and things like that. And they were always really up for it. So I've got 2 things that I'm doing at present. One is around collecting. I'll start with collecting the history of women in rugby league. There's the first ever women's rugby league tour. Well, women's rugby league started in 1985, but the first ever tour was in 1996, and there was 5 tours to Australia, New Zealand, and there was a World Cup. And each time the women had to raise between 50 and 80,000 in order to tour. None of those women. So I reckon there's probably about 150 women have never been capped for playing for the country. So I've got a real passion to make that happen in the World Cup year. It's 25 years since the first tour, and the Rugby League World Cup. And I think the parity that's been shown within the Rugby League World Cup of the women in the wheelchair and the men all on one platform, all getting paid, all getting equal measures of publicity and everything together is a really great opportunity to celebrate the history of Women's International Rugby League, and possibly look at a Hall of Fame for these women as well that were pioneers to the women's sport. And also we might get some Kiwis and Australians over that also were on those tours that we can sort of build into that particular project, which would be really exciting. And then the other side, it was asked last year to chair the the International Rugby League Women's Advisory Group. So I started that last year. It's from nations all over the world. So there's 8 time zones. So it's really hard finding a meeting that's not in the early hours of the morning. But I think I found it, this last one. I have to go at 8 o'clock at night, and I think somewhere else is at 11 o'clock at night. And all the rest are quite sensible hours. It's there to look at. So we've set really high level intentions for the female game to be able to spread it and put structures in worldwide, because I believe after the Women's Rugby League World Cup, it's just going to fly. So we just need to put the structures in place. We need to get more countries playing. We need to get more women playing. And the advisory group is there to begin to look at the international, advise on the international calendar, be able to look at domestic competitions and how we help those grow, as well as raising the profile of the women's game, getting more coaches, but also not just coaches in, but the profile of coaches, and also coaches that understand how to coach women, which is really imperative. And then recognising the leaders throughout the world. As I've been working in this project for the last year, it's amazing how many women in rugby league are out there, and men that are supportive of the female game and really leading the charge to develop the sport internationally. So yes, I'm lucky enough to be chair and putting the structures in place to be able to sort of springboard off the Rugby League World Cup in 2021, which is really exciting.
It is certainly very exciting. I must agree with you as well in terms of like the women's game before lockdown. Like the women's game was really seeming to take off, certainly in terms of, being showcased a lot more, maybe prevalent in TV and stuff like that. And it certainly was growing, even like I say, in the city of Hull, there was more teams starting to form and stuff like that. So hopefully, obviously next year there's going to be certainly some growth in terms of rugby league, and with the World Cup, I hope that will be a big lift for that as well. And I just wanted to ask now as well, just moving on from this, sort of asking you about you founded in 2017 Commonsense Initiative. What sort of influenced you to form that company? What was the influence in terms of starting that?
The basis of it was I'd been working in rugby league for 20 years, and as I say, rugby league and in rugby league development, we really had an impact in some amazing areas in amazing communities. And I did some brilliant travel, and got more women, wheelchair, you name it. We had an impact on so many people's lives through rugby league, and particularly the charities of rugby league of all the clubs that I've mentioned. I used to head those up. And I knew rugby league really made a difference, but I felt as though in the role I was doing at the rugby league, I'd stopped making a difference. I didn't feel I had an impact anymore. And resources, when resources were put in, they weren't always maintained and things like that. So I just said to them, I think I'm ready for going on my own really and making a difference. So all I knew when I left was I wanted to make a positive difference. And even if I just made a positive difference to one person, then that would be absolutely fantastic every year. So I set up Commonsense Initiative. Initially, I wanted to go into school. Well, I went into schools, and particularly working with young people. I always call them the young people that kick the doors in, because the education system doesn't always cater for those kids that have particularly kinesthetic learning and they're sports people, arts people, or kids that have really chaotic backgrounds but just need a different way of learning, really. So I started off on that, but again, that began to it wasn't sustainable. So schools would invite you in, but I became another intervention to those young people. And that's the last thing I wanted. These young people have so many people coming through their lives. I didn't want to continue that. So I'd started what's called NLP, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming, absolutely ridiculous name, but actually an awesome way to make differences to people's lives. So I do NLP coaching, which is basically the N is for the neuro bit. So it's about, we've got a World Wide Web in our head, what's happening in our heads. The linguistic is about shaping it differently and talking about it differently in a more positive way. And the programming is about reprogramming what you've got going in your head, because we weren't born with fears, phobias, limiting beliefs, limiting identity, anxiety, fear, PTSD. We weren't born with any of that. It's been programmed in our head for whatever reason. So it's now moved to, I've got different arms to the business. So one of them's around coaching, one-to-one coaching. So I work with individuals, and I wanted to make it affordable as well. Because with NLP as well, I do hypnotherapy, which I don't change people into ducks and do all that sort of thing, but it's a really good way of getting people to relax and be able to access their unconscious mind to make the changes that they want to make. So it's not a good business model, because what I would probably do in 6 weeks, I do in 3 with hypnotherapy, but actually it's about the people making those changes. But I also, so I've got all that set up on one-to-one coaching, and I've got, dealing with some really, particularly at the moment, around anxiety and stress and depression, and helping people get the tools that they probably already have to be able to get through in life, and make the changes that they want to make. And then the other arm to my business is I've got a partner, Jenny Frampton, a business partner, and we've set up something called TeamYou, which is about gender leadership. And we started off with World Athletics on this journey last year, where Seb Kerr's really up for making it a balance where women are in decision-making positions, because believe it or not, athletics it's not balanced where women are in decision-making positions, whatever that may be. So he brought us in, and I've put all neuro-linguistic programming, all NLP through this gender leadership, so that people, because basically it helps you to change your mind, helps you to rethink how you're thinking and you're feeling, so you can change your behaviour. So when you come up against barriers like I did throughout my refereeing, you're able to deal with it better, or you're able to reason with it better. And some of these women that we've been training up are going to come across a lot within the athletics world. So we trained up 39 tutors, who then are now going training in right globally around the world, leaders, to the point where we had a conference 2 weeks ago, and 300 women have been trained within lockdown, because we had to go as a webinar. So I'm really passionate about spreading that now around the gender leadership, around the leadership side, and the NLP, which is really, it's not about time management leadership or anything like that. It's about how you manage yourself, TeamYou, how you manage yourself as a person to be able to be a better leader. And it's just gone absolutely awesome. So next year this year we'd hoped to major, but obviously it's all gone online and webinary. But next year, we've got Barbados, where they're going to have us in working with women. I've got a couple of irons in the fire around the UK, which I'm really excited about. So there's sort of 2 arms. There's the personal one-to-one stuff, but also there's making a difference to women, so they can go out and make a difference to other women and people within their environments. So I absolutely love it, as you can tell.
No, it's really empowering to hear that you've obviously made a big difference. I mean, to have such an organisation like World Athletics get involved is something really, really, massive in terms of that sport. And obviously with it being hopefully next year an Olympic year, hopefully that's going to have a positive effect in terms of inspiring more women and in terms of taking up these sort of leadership roles in athletics as well. And what I kind of wanted to veer towards it a little bit here is in terms of, obviously this year has had its challenges, obviously with the virus and with the lockdowns and stuff like that. What has it been like for yourself in terms of like the people coming towards you as a company? Has there been quite an intake of people looking for help in terms of finding purpose? Has there been people looking to sort of help their self-esteem or confidence because of situations like, for instance, with working from home? So obviously we are social animals, and having that taken away from us, has there been some of the challenges the people that you have been interacting had?
Yeah, a whole range, and it's affected everyone so different. One of the things I always say is we're all as unique on the inside as we are on the outside. And some people, they've flown through because the businesses have grown, or, they've managed to keep working, or they're exhausted because actually, all these key workers, the people that have kept working, haven't had a break because of the whole thing. So there's things around that stress related and that anxiety of all of that. But also quite a lot around not being able to earn, not being the breadwinner. So the anxiousness around that and not being able to know if you've got your job. The unknown has been a big one. And also their purpose in lives. What is my purpose if I'm not working, or if I haven't got this job, or if something's going to go on? So there's been a whole heap. This seems particularly, I think this time of year is always tough for a lot of people around sort of stress and anxiety, because if you've got a busy life or you've got lots going on, add Christmas to it or add anything new to it, then it sort of blows everything out of proportion. So it's always bad. But this particular loneliness has been pretty big.
I'd
People
agree.
home at the home on their own has been a really big one. And so, yeah, there's been a real mix and affecting people differently. And now there is bits of chinks of light, but at one point people felt hopeless and like, when's this all going to end? Because I can't see an end to it. So, yeah, a real mix of people, and even people that haven't got jobs, but were working, living at home and doing things, but couldn't go out and about and socialise and see people. So I've done lots of stuff. I do lives every morning, just 2 or 3 minutes, and it's just how I'm thinking and feeling at that time. And it's just because some days, I got up and thought, God, what's the purpose of all this? I am just so fed up with this routine, and when's it going to end, and working from home. And I've been quite honest with my lives, because we can't all be perfect all the time. And
No.
you're going to have dips. This time has challenged some of the people I didn't think it would challenge. So I work with quite a lot of national governing bodies, and some of the CEOs who are good friends of mine, and I've just rung up to see how they are. And they're 20 minutes later, I'm picking them up from the floor because they're just on the floor with anxiety. Is the game on? Is it off? Is it, all the welfare of ringing all their staff, 180 staff with what's happening has been really challenging, and looking after other people. So been really diverse and tough times. And one of my things that I've said to everyone is we're all dealing with it differently. So just be patient. The one that shouts at you in the supermarket, get away from me, I'm going to get the virus. You need to listen to them because they're anxious. I've got one woman I volunteered quite early on to ring a couple of people every week, people that couldn't get out. She didn't go out the house now. She hasn't been out the house since March. And then the doctors didn't send her medication, and they told her to go to the A&E. And it's like, wow, she hadn't been out the house since March. So to go to A&E where the virus she saw it was a really big deal, really big deal. I also work with people that have been diagnosed with cancer. So it's been really tough for them. Some operations cancelled and, all that sort of thing. And, when you've got terminal cancer, one of the things I always used to say to them, go live your life. Well, they haven't really been able to do that. So, a whole mix of things going on. Challenging, but it's so rewarding to be able to give people sort of tools for dealing with things, knowing that some of the meditations or some of the hypnotherapy sessions they're actually using so that they can, and some of the the advice that I give them, they can use them so that they can carry on, really, get that resilience to carry on. So it'd be very challenging for a lot of people, and still will be into next year.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Have you got any sort of maybe a couple of tips maybe for people in terms of if they suffer with any sort of anxiety or any problems that, sort of they may be suffering right now, or anything for any of the listeners that might be suffering with some sort of something like, say, self-esteem or anxiety, something like how have you got any things that you think that can be advised?
Yeah, one of the big things is don't presume people know. So, because a lot of times you're thinking it in your head and you're thinking other people are thinking how you're thinking or that they know. So the biggest thing anyone can do is talk to someone that they trust and that's close to them. Or even there's so many helplines out there now just to talk about it, because sometimes it releases that pressure of just talking about it. And I know a lot of my clients, sometimes we just talk and they go, that's cleared it all up for me. It's cleared it all up for me. The other thing is around finding things that you really love to do. So try and remember what you love to do. So I love going out walking on the hills. So when I had any of my bouts, I've got a collie dog, and I'm outside there on the hills with him and taking that time for myself. So the other is around time for yourself. What do you get lost in? Some people it's creativity. Mine's on the hills in the fresh air. You can't beat, for me, getting out there, and I'm in a beautiful place where it's very hilly. So I just absolutely love that. So it's about finding, some people have been running or cycling or it might even be ringing someone up just for a chatter, or doing something that just you say, oh, I feel a lot better about that. Sometimes a hot bath, go and have a hot blooming bubble bath and enjoy yourself and spoil yourself. And then the other thing is around just making sure you structure your day as well. So sometimes, turn the radio off. Sorry, yeah, that's a biggie. Turn the blooming radio off. It's just doom and gloom. Only listen to the bits that you need to listen to, because it's and the papers, because at the moment there's nothing good to say, and now it's moved into this blooming Brexit, because it can build up your anxiety. So I know I used to initially, because I listened to Radio 4 when lockdown, when it all first started. I just had it on in the background. And I found my anxiety rising. And I thought, oh yeah, what's that about? And I realised, even though I wasn't really listening, I was taking on all the stuff that was going on and the speculation. Don't listen to speculation. Listen to what's true, what's actually happening, because the news sort of creates that. So having people around you is really key that you can trust and talk to, as I say, getting out and doing something that you really enjoy. And yeah, it's about taking that time out and looking after your health. So eating the good food, if you're finding you're going off, I know if I have a day where I've got a lovely farm shop down here where I go and I buy all junk food, if I'm going to have a bad day the next day because I feel sluggish and horrible and all those sort of things. So good healthy food's good and lifts your spirits. Things that lift your spirits is really important. And then there's some really good apps and things around meditations and bringing your stress levels down through breathing, and I do a lot of yoga and Pilates for that as well. So there's loads of things out there, but you've got to do what feels good for you. And around self-esteem, just remember what you have done. Make a list of all the good stuff that you have done, which is really important, because we often forget what we've done, and I call it putting your torch beam in what you can't do, continue into a negative spiral.
No, I think they're really great tips, especially like the last point there about the sort of self-esteem things. I think gratitude and sort of affirmations are great things in terms of them, and I certainly agree with you in terms of finding things that you really enjoy doing. So they're really great tips. And I would like to ask you in terms of the future. I know it's hard to look into the future with the way things have been this year, but what are the future plans for you in terms of Commonsense and the trying to think. Sorry, I forgot the other name of the company that you're part of as well.
TeamYou, the program.
TeamYou, sorry.
Yeah. Well, TeamYou is going to grow. So next year, as I say, we've already got Barbados in March. So that's my hope. So we're doing a lot of work with young people and women in Barbados around leadership and self-esteem, and that's all through football, actually. So that's a brilliant project. I've got a couple of more leadership ones that are just bubbling at the minute, which will hopefully have fruition this year. World Athletics continues to grow, so they are so committed to making a difference that we've got loads of great projects. We've developed all e-learning packages and things through all of this, so it's been a real industrious time to get things online so that you can continue it. Because my big thing is, I don't like going on courses that don't have a what next. I don't like to do anything that doesn't have a what next. So everything we do, we make sure that there's always something to continue their learning or make a really positive difference to other people. And then from my coaching, NLP coaching, it's just building that. So these lockdowns have helped because people didn't wanted to come face to face, whereas now people are using technology. So it's just as effective on Zoom, all my coaching and hypnotherapy, but people were more reluctant to do it. But now, I've got the whole world now, haven't I, that I can give clients. So, so continue to build that. And then obviously in a World Cup year, I've got the heritage projects that I'm doing, which I'm very excited about. And recognising those women next year in the Rugby League World Cup and going to as many games as I can to celebrate sort of Rugby League and what's actually happening in the sport, which is, fingers crossed, as far as I know, is still on. And it'll just be a great relief and celebration for us to be able to, at the end of next year, recognise the women from the Sporting Heritage Project that I want to do, but also just to celebrate Rugby League and it coming back to crowds, hopefully.
No, it sounds a really exciting year for yourself. Certainly lots going on and certainly sounds like a lot of growth as well in terms of your businesses too. And finally, what I like to do is finish on a couple of questions, which I ask every guest that's been on my podcast so far. And the first one is basically about, what does it mean for you to be human?
To be human is about making a positive difference for me. Although I do believe in the spirit world, so it's really hard because I think spirits make a positive difference. So to be human is using, my values that are deep rooted around honesty and integrity, and that reliability and trustworthy with a bit of a humour added in. Is that we're put on this earth to make a difference, and that's what I, right from being a young girl, I'd always wanted to do, and that's what I continue to do right until the spirit world takes me away and I come back and have mischief on people.
No, that's a really great answer for that. And finally, I'd like to ask is, what helps you stay humble?
Funny enough, I've just done a live where I'd just done a World Athletics conference. So we'd had the 300 women and I was really excited. And I took my dog out, who brought me a squeaky pig. And I am his pig thrower. So it's about doing normal things. I've got some great friends from my whole days, from childhood as well, who, I go back and I can be Julia.lee and they never ask anything of me. And it's just lovely friendships from my college days. In fact, the play and everything else, before I had the play written, I never thought I'd achieved. So there's actually some of me that's, yes, you stay humble, but actually you've got to recognise what your achievements are as well. So it's around using your achievements to make a difference. And some of the clients that come back to me and feedback, and I just think, that's just lovely to be able to achieve that and to make that difference. And how lucky am I? I've got something, a friend and I, whenever we do anything, how lucky are we to be whatever we're doing, whenever we're doing it. And that just keeps you grounded. So.
No, it's really good that you still keep in contact with them, and obviously it's really good to see that. And I think you should be very proud of your achievements, certainly in terms of the play and what you've achieved in rugby. And I think that was certainly recognised by the RFL when I saw that you'd been awarded that medal as well.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. What I want to do now is just give you a platform, sort of like to just talk about sort of Commonsense Initiative for people that have maybe, that have listened or watched this, and in terms of giving you sort of where they might want to go if they want to find out any further details or where they need to go. Yeah,
absolutely. So I have a website, which is www.csi2012.co.uk. So that tells you a bit more about what I do around my hypnotherapy and all that sort of thing. Plus, if anyone just wanted to email me, I'm on Facebook. CSI, Julia.lee and CSI on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do Twitter so much, so you won't get me on Twitter so much. So I'm on all these sort of platforms. If people want to come and listen to my ramblings on Facebook, please do. And also I've got my email, which is julia.lee, that's L-E-E, at csi2012.co.uk as well. So please drop a line. And, if people, hook into my Facebook, you're never alone. So, I'm always up for direct messages of people that are struggling and just need someone to say, I'm struggling and are you there for me? So I get quite a lot of those.
That's great to hear. And like I say, I will put them in the episode notes as well for people to find them as well. And I just want to thank you for your time and obviously for such an interesting background in terms of what done in rugby league and into what you do now has been really, really inspirational for the women in sport. And I think it's been really enjoyable to listen to your story, Julia. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for inviting me. As I said at the beginning, I always like talking about myself.
So thank you very much, Julia, and stay humble.